1 month ago today, my water broke. And the funny thing is, I didn't even know I was pregnant. I had been on the kidney list 4 days shy of 2 years. Like most people on the transplant list, I had spent tons of time researching how the list worked, how long I would be on it, when I could expect a call. I expected 3 to 5 years. That's the average given for this region of the country. So imagine my surprise when, shy of 2 years, I get a phone call. Let me set the stage. In November of 2023, I ran the New York Marathon in an ego-crushing time of 6+ hours. My creatinine was at 3.8, my GFR was in the teens, and I was severely anemic. I had a great nephrologist who very early in the process educated my wife and I about the importance of getting on the transplant list while you were still as healthy as possible. I also had great information provided to me that emphasized diet and exercise as a means of forestalling the need for dialysis. I'm one of the fortunate ones that was never on dialysis. I remained fairly asymptomatic. I had some problems with my taste. Every now and then I smelled like a cat box off-gassing ammonia. I got some edema in my legs on occasion, but the greatest impact on me was as an avid runner having dirty and tired blood. I was at one point a sub 4-hour marathoner, and I had totally lost that. So I continued to exercise as much as I could, and I practiced a very strict diet. And on the 19th of March, I had just received notice that I had been admitted to the Chicago Marathon in October of this year. I was on my way out the door to go for a 10K run when my phone rang. And it was one of those situations where I had to decide whether or not to answer the phone. Thank goodness I did. Picked up the phone, and here's what I hear. Is this David Novak? Yes, it is. Would you please give me your date of birth? 3/1/62. David, my name is Karina. I'm with the Transplant Center. Whew. We have a kidney. To say I had a lump in my throat, total understatement. I asked Karina to pause a moment and walked into our bedroom where my wife Erin was, put the phone on a speaker and mouthed to her, I have a kidney. Karina went on to explain that the kidney that was available to me came from a 38-year-old donor, had a KDPI score of 38, but was HCV positive. That kind of threw a monkey wrench in my thinking, because at that time, I had just acquired the potential of a living donor. He had just begun the process of review. I wasn't sure whether he was going to make it through the review process. So that was something that was kind of popped into my head. Erin and I talked real briefly, and Karina let me know that this was a provisional offer. There still had to be a biopsy conducted on the kidney. She said, we'll call you back in 2 hours. If the kidney passes the biopsy, we'll expect you at the hospital tonight at 1 a.m. About 45 minutes later, Karina calls back and says, we're good to go. Do you want it? In that 45-minute time, I had read everything I could about HCV and its treatment. I read everything I could about deceased kidney donations and the advantages of a 62-year-old getting a 38-year-old's kidney. I was intellectually swayed towards taking the kidney, but still hadn't decided. Aaron and I decided at that point, we'll begin the process, but I was not yet fully committed. Over the course of the next 11 hours, it's amazing what we had to do. As this came out of the blue, we had to cancel a 1-month international trip that we were going to take this month. We had to notify family and friends. We had to change social engagements. We had to do everything in order to get to the hospital. We got to the hospital at 1 a.m. We checked in an admission, and we were then admitted to Unit 11 East. I still wasn't committed. We walked in, the first person we met was a delightful nurse by the name of Jessie, who began walking me through the process of pre-op. I bombarded her with questions. And the most common refrain I got from her, and the most common refrain I got from every resident and every nurse I interfaced with the rest of the night was, "That's a good question. You'll have to ask the doctor." At shift change at 7 a.m. in the morning, after having been stuck and prodded and showered and still laying in bed, I met a nurse named Michael on 11 East. I asked Michael all the same questions I'd asked everybody else. And Michael was the first person who spoke my language to me. He let me know it was okay to have all those questions, and he emphasized the importance of getting answers to all of them so that I was comfortable with the process. He went out of his way to contact the doctor and let the doctor know that I had questions and wanted to deal with him. Michael came back into my room and let me know that the doctor was going to give me a call. About half an hour later, Michael pops in and goes, "Has the doctor called you?" And I said, "No, not yet." 10 minutes later, I met my hero, Dr. Krishnan. Any of you know Dr. Krishnan, soft-spoken, Zen-like, calm, cool. That's the way he struck me. Dr. Krishnan came into my room, and again, I began bombarding him with questions. Never once did he roll his eyes. He looked me in the eye. He addressed my intellectual questions, but more importantly, he met me on an emotional plane, recognizing where I was at that time. We talked about my living donor. We talked about the potential for me having a living donor as opposed to this kidney. And because Dr. Krishna took the time to educate me that morning, I was able to finally commit. Surgery went well. I had no problems with it. And when I woke up back on 11 East, my relationship with the nursing staff began. As Tim said earlier, I don't know where you guys hire these people. They are, without exception, the most kind, caring, intelligent people I've ever met. I say that while at the time they were caring for me, I was on massive doses of prednisone and could not keep my mouth shut. All I did was jabber. Every thought I had came out of my mouth. And again, never once did anybody roll their eyes. They always took the time to meet me where I was emotionally. I also want to specifically compliment Dr. Krishnan's touch. I think he's got magic hands. One of the questions I was asked over and over and over during recovery is, how's your pain level? How's your pain level? To be honest, my pain level on a scale of 1 to 10 never exceeded a 1.5. And that came from being intubated roughly, so I felt like Mike Tyson had punched me in the mouth. I never had any pain around my incision. The day after surgery, I got up out of bed without assistance and walked 2 miles on the ward. Since that day, I've walked every single day. And again, like Tim, being neurotic and keeping spreadsheets, last week I walked 29.62 miles. I can tell you the pace, my heart rate, and how many calories I ate. Dr. Krishnan made me promise not to run for 3 months after surgery. I've honored that. I have walked every day, and I'm now walking with 3-pound weights, trying to get my heart rate up high enough so that I can maintain my aerobic base and run the Chicago Marathon. When I ran the New York Marathon, here's the shirt I wore. I was fortunate to be assigned, because of my history of running, to the first of 6 waves in the New York Marathon. That means that 51,000 people passed me and saw this shirt. I had about 20 people during the race tap me on the shoulder and either introduce themselves as recipients or donors. So it was very heartening. I also had a very peculiar experience. At about mile 17, I ran past an older gentleman, and he yelled at me, "Hey, kidney boy!" I slowed down, and he caught up with me, and he began asking me questions about, do you really need a kidney? Is this for you? He then asked me if he could ask me questions about my labs. What's your creatinine? What's your GFR? And I kind of looked at him, and this is the way he introduced himself to me. "Oh, I'm a world-renowned nephrologist from Johns Hopkins." I have no idea. It's very, very funny because all of the doctors I've met here have not nearly as much ego as that gentleman did. Moving forward, like I said, I feel incredibly blessed by the care I got, the people I've met. Meeting Dr. Vijay post-surgery was another highlight for me. I'm a nut about research. I read everything I can, and unfortunately, sometimes I get ahead of myself. When I first met Dr. Vijay, again, I was under the influence of massive doses of prednisone. But I was able to ask Vijay tons of questions. Vijay always took the time to educate me, to make sure I understood things, and to guide me through this very scary process. One of the things I've said to both of my doctors is, I was so overwhelmed with the gift of this kidney that I wanted to be the perfect patient. If you tell me to do something, I will do it. You tell me not to drink alcohol, it's done. You tell me not to run for 3 months, it's done. You tell me to wear a mask in public, done. I cannot begin to describe to you what it feels like to be given this gift. It is absolutely overwhelming. The most difficult part of this process for me, and to give you a little bit of background, I've made my living writing. Legal documents, contracts, books. I like to believe I'm a very good writer. But the hardest thing I've ever had to write in my life was a letter to my donor's family. A couple of things made it difficult. They were grieving. I received a deceased donor's kidney. They were grieving and I was celebrating. How do you honor their grief and share condolences with them as you're celebrating this gift? I also have absolutely no idea who these people are. They could be old, they could be young, they could be purple, they could be black. I know nothing about them. But writing a letter to them was crucially important to me, to let them know how important this process was. One of the last things I want to say is, going through this process, one of the things that really struck me is I have absolutely no idea what the politics of any of you are. I know nothing about your religion, and I could care less, because you are the kindest, most caring people I have ever met. And I want to thank all of you. So, in 2 months, I begin training for the Chicago Marathon. My wife and I are trying to decide what shirt I will wear for that. I want to be a little egotistical and say, hey, kidney transplant 201 days ago. But I also want to request everybody, as Tim said, everybody at a minimum should be a donor on their license. What a gift. What an absolute gift. So, thank you very much.